Hello, Katy.
Hello, Jenny. How are you?
I am, so long as I'm sitting down, I'm good.
Good.
Maybe.
Good.
But I will probably wiggle a lot today.
It's okay. The
I
peg leg
wiggled
is
a lot this
healing.
morning. Plus, it wouldn't even be me wiggling over the knee. It would be wiggling about what you wrote.
This is a concerning case. This is one of those stories that you just can't let go of because you keep pulling the thread, and there's more and more about how our state tax dollars are working against the populace in what I would say is the most important agency. It's the agency that has the power to take people's children from them. The more that I focus on this case, the more I see evidence of weaponization of a state agency. So we have a lot to talk about.
It's not even that. So for me, because when I read it the other day, this won't be a popular thing to say. Not like, anybody who knows me really cares. I'm gonna care about that, but our society is just in the toilet. It's just in the toilet. If you're, I'm a big libertarian, you do you thing, and if that's, having a same-sex relationship or whatever, okay, I don't personally think it's healthy. I don't subscribe to it. I don't feel like Christians should be that if that's what they, believe that they are. I have grave concern. I had to throw that in because that's just funny. Sorry, that was going back to when I was saying I was wiggling. I have such concern over I don't even know how to explain it, Katy. People are so hedonistic. It's all about what I want, what I feel, what I think I need, what I'm entitled to. And we've lost the ability, so many of us, to see other people as people, and not a part of our scheme. I don't know. Am I just barking at the wrong tree here?
Well, what I would say is if you look at this from a perspective of families' rights, and you start to think, me, I do a lot of reporting where families are silenced. And I've spent a lot of time in the public school systems where we have a child sexual abuse problem. And families are continually silenced there. I can tell you this, people have a right in America under the Constitution to live the way that they want to live within the law, correct? And if a lesbian couple came to me and said, say, one of them has a daughter and she's, say, in junior high, and ag teacher Mr. Jones has been sending her dirty pictures, and they dig in and they find out that she's been sexually abused by ag teacher Jones, and they went to the school and it was covered up, like so many of the things that we've talked about, and we find out that 3 other districts have passed the trash with ag teacher Jones. I would be the first one to say, I will tell your story. I will listen to your story. You have a right to protect your children, and those are tax dollars that are putting your children at risk. So I don't see this as any different in the sense that we have a system that operates under a group of state laws under Title 10A, and there are certain things that we do and we don't do to protect children, and there are certain ways that they're mandated to work with and to serve families. The families of Oklahoma are the clients of the Oklahoma Department of Human Services Child Welfare Division. They are to serve them. When I see it being turned around for whatever reason, ideology, personal relationships, anything like that, we're outside of the law. And there are also issues related to potential discrimination within the system that we're seeing. We're seeing that the DHS system, and what this case has illustrated all in one case, is that people who identify outside of heterosexuality, now this is the new DEI, affirmative action has been replaced with alternate sexualities, And those folks who identify as within the LGBTQ community have been disproportionately hired. They've been even more disproportionately promoted into higher positions. And as I dig deeper into this, they've even placed state custody children in their own homes. So if you have someone at the management level of DHS and they're placing children and eventually adopting them into their own homes, is this complete bias? Are we overriding all those couples who stood in line waiting for what they call a high propensity case, someone that comes into custody that things are so bad and it doesn't look like they're ever coming home? Are we following the law? Are we following policy in how those children are placed? And we already know from reporting that I've done that standards for safety in some cases where children, state custody children in Oklahoma, are put into same-sex homes have been set aside. The Lincoln Lockman case, they set it aside. A very good worker who, ironically, we would have described as a DEI hire 10 years ago. She was a young Black woman who was extremely good at her job, had a reputation for getting kids back to their parents and being helpful, was driven out of the system for putting up red flags about Lincoln being placed in a home with two men. And it turns out she was right. Every instinct, every observation. One of them eventually twice arrested for child sexual abuse, a long history of it. So we know they're setting those standards aside. And then I highlight whenever I get a chance the case of Xander Bruntmeyer, a 2-month-old child, and we'll talk about that later, who they unsubstantiated, basically went in to investigate abuse in a same-sex home, and a LGBT investigator said, no, it didn't happen. And it did happen. We know later because she was convicted of it after another child went into the home and was murdered by the same woman, abusively murdered. So we know there's this tendency, there's this bias. The question is, who's keeping it in check? Where is the upper management of DHS? How did this get to this point?
Well, I don't think anybody. I mean, it seems to me. I mean, I'm the same way as Ed. I mean, it hurts my heart. It's and the system is sick. The whole system is sick. I mean, you know, I love you, Katy. You're one of my best friends, but good Lord, I hate talking to you.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm going to go out and I have some ideas for some happier stories because you have to balance.
Oh my gosh, really? You can do happy stories?
I can. I need to. But
well, just for your own sanity. I mean, because this, and I say that obviously as a joke because your reporting on this has opened the eyes of so many Oklahomans to what is going on under our nose. But I did want to catch you on something a second ago. You said that Oklahomans are customers of DHS. I argue that they're not clients. They're the ones that pay for the service. So I guess a client pays for services, but their tax dollars are being stolen from them to do it. It's not like I'm going to the hat shop and buying a hat because I want to. I mean, our tax dollars are stolen from us and given to these people. So I don't, I think that's one of the reasons they're out of control, Katy.
Well, accountability is a massive issue in our government systems, and DHS is absolutely no exception. So I had a moment of irony the other day. I went to Walmart to buy milk and toothpaste, and I'm standing at the self-checkout. And as I'm paying for my milk and toothpaste, a survey comes up. How many stars did you give it? How was your visit today, right? There's all this feedback just for buying milk and getting toothpaste. And I thought to myself, not only is there no feedback for our child welfare system, the client is not allowed. They are silenced at every point. We've had so many families tell us DHS went on the stand and lied. They lied within their reports to the court. They omitted critical information that would have looked good for the family. And the family doesn't have a shot. Most of the people involved with DHS have a court-appointed attorney. who DHS and that judge and that district attorney in the courtroom work with every single day. They roll cases through and rubber stamp them. And that I watched it. I watched it the other day while I was sitting outside the courtroom. A court-appointed attorney come up into the waiting area and say the name of the family. She's meeting with them for the first time as they're walking in. She does not know them, and she's being paid to represent them. And she meets with them right before they walk in the door. She introduces herself, and she's going to defend their right to get their child back from the government. There is no feedback loop here. There is no accountability. The way that they track success at DHS, if you looked at the law and you tracked by the law, saying that they always have to have a case plan goal unless something really goes wrong of reunification, and they have to work that case plan goal. Your job is to help this family and get this child back home safely. No one is promoted based on the percentage of kids that they reunify with their families. None. They don't even know those stats. You can't walk into a worker's office.
Wait. Office. They don't even know those stats?
Per worker? No, they don't. Per supervisor? No. Wouldn't you think if you were managing and you were saying,
what?
I have this worker over here who has put all but 2 sets of siblings in her 5-year career back with their families successfully, I would say, you go. And if I know that another worker over here or supervisor has put only 2 back out of the hundreds of cases she's touched in the last 5 years, I know we've got a problem. They're not looking at that. And when you look at the supervisor level, which is kind of what jumped out first in this case, those supervisors typically have 5 workers under them. Those workers have lots of cases each under them. They are checking off on what is said to the court in potentially hundreds, maybe even thousands of cases a year, depending on what's going through that office. And
Katy,
no one is measuring success.
How does that actually happen?
I don't think it is as strange. Our government constantly says it's data-driven. But what data and what are you doing with it? And they play with data. You know, I've worked at 2 state agencies at the state office level. They will play with data until it makes them look good, which usually means eliminating any variables that make any difference at all. It's kind of like when Joy Hoffmeister always bragged when she was state superintendent that Oklahoma is #1 in availability of pre-K to kids who are pre-K across the state. Right. You know what they left out? Those kids that attended were doing worse than the kids that didn't.
Oh,
you know
interesting.
So that is what's happening with DHS, all of these things. Are they meeting the state required mandate, the reason that their agency exists? How are they doing on that scale? Well, nobody's ever drawn that scale.
Well, you know, John Boy makes a good point here. So then doesn't that make DHS a private entity? So if it's funded by government, but then the government rules don't apply to them, or they just do whatever and they don't have, doesn't that kind of make them private?
I see what you're saying there. To me, it makes them a rogue government agency. And that's where we are now as we start to talk about the Dana Mooney case again. We've reached the point where I feel like we have a rogue agency. And I'm getting feedback from lawmakers who are telling me when you try to bring this up at the Oklahoma State Capitol, this is what they hear. And they say this as a quote. Other lawmakers tell them, don't do it. Don't get into it. Don't try to reform DHS. It's too far gone. You won't be able to do it, and it'll ruin your political career. So this is so bad that we're not going to touch it as legislators.
No, I guess I didn't understand the concept of political career. I guess I thought when you ran to be a representative, you were actually a representative of the people, and it wasn't really a career so much as a job.
Yes, nobody said it'll stop your ability to serve the people. That's not the way it's worded.
Yeah, that's just nuts. Okay, well, show us what you have, because it's...
All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about the Dana Mooney case. The last time I was here, Dana Mooney, who is an advocate for parents' rights, a very public advocate in Oklahoma for parents' rights. She is with the Moms for Liberty organization, probably the strongest, and also among those of the progressive stance, the most controversial parents' rights group across the country. And so they have local chapter chairs, and they do that by county. Now we used to have like 5 of them across the country, the state, that were chapter chairs. Now we only have 4, because let me tell you, when you talk to these are women who have kids in the school systems now. That's what they focus on. And it becomes extremely difficult for them and for their children once they start fighting for parents' rights in the public school arena. So not surprisingly that some of them step out and step back in.
Gosh, I thought people were supposed to be tolerant.
There's not a lot of tolerance to this story, and that's the big problem. I am intolerant of intolerance, no matter which way it's going.
Yep.
But so Dana Mooney is one of only 4 Moms for Liberty chapter chairs in the state, and two of those chapter chairs have had their sons medically kidnapped. Yeah. We've talked about that.
That's crazy. How honestly, before you go on, how do people not see that? That's half. How do people? That's a big deal.
It's a very big deal. And I haven't heard any reporting beyond Visit about political persecution in this case, and how we have to consider the possibility, given the measurable evidence that were provided. So I gave some context here, and I linked to some stats that have to do with child welfare in Oklahoma. Approximately 1% of kids of Oklahoma kids touch the child welfare system each year. Okay. Far fewer. So think about a call comes into the hotline. They have to go out and make sure the child's okay. So far fewer of those are taken into custody. So it's only a fraction of those 1% that come into custody. We're at 50%. So 2 of the 4 Moms for Liberty leaders, 50% of those have had their kids not only involved, but taken into custody. So Roberta Lewis, we told her story. That's also on the Visit site if you want to read her story, about sort of some crazy talk at school. And suddenly her child is taken by DHS and forced into mental health custody over a video that no adults involved even saw or could corroborate. It was, he was taken into what's called temporary custody. He was gone from her for 2 weeks. Dana Mooney, now twice in the last month, her child has been taken into emergency custody twice. And now he's in permanent custody, despite within court hearings, DHS employees reportedly lying by omission, being caught in those hearings doing so. That's what's reported by the people in those hearings. And that is really shocking. So people I just mentioned, Dana's very visible. Here just in October, she got a national award from Moms for Liberty for her ability to, so the award was in shaping the narrative surrounding parental rights in Oklahoma. And she's also the Oklahoma legislative chair. So she's dangerous if you want to keep the progressive legislation flowing. You can see why there would be motivation for targeting. Then we did a little recap, which I just told you about what happened with Presten. And just to tell people, Presten has autism. And a part of this story that has yet to be told, but I feel like it needs to be recorded, is that this family's skepticism of the medical establishment was very, very well earned. Presten is 17 now, and he's autistic. But according to mom, he was developing very normally, hit every milestone, every benchmark up until 2 years old, when he received his 2-year-old immunizations according to the CDC child immunization schedule. He immediately began having severe seizures that were almost nonstop. They could not treat him at Oklahoma Children's Hospital. They didn't have the specialist to treat him. The family had to seek other care. They went to Texas. They were basically told he was diagnosed with, according to mom, at least 3 seizure disorders, including a form of epilepsy, immediately after those shots. No one apologized and said this was the shots. No one said this is what we do when a child is damaged by the shots. She was just told he would be not much more than a vegetable in his functioning. And even a quote she gave me is they told her that he would likely never be able to learn more than 10 words. So mom had to choose those words very carefully. That was the prognosis they gave her. And they rejected it. The family rejected that. They did their own.
Thank goodness.
Yes, they looked into detoxifying that child. They did their own research. They found every form of therapy and holistic treatment that they could. They were inside the medical establishment and outside and looking for everything that they could do for Presten. And the result was, I mean, it's really a story about early intervention for autism.
Yeah, I think so too.
I've had the pleasure of interviewing Presten, and he is on the higher functioning end for sure of autism. He's an exceptional kid. So to know that they weren't very trustworthy of the medical system going into this is, I just think, a foundation people need to have to understand. So long story short, we talked about this before. DHS shows up at their door. There's an anonymous report of medical neglect and educational neglect. So there's a homeschool element to this too. We see, even though in Oklahoma, the law says you don't have to send them to school. You can homeschool and you don't have to turn in your curriculum to anybody.
Yep.
They show up with that accusation anyway. My personal belief is those should be screened out according to the law. But they showed up with those, and the worker sort of played along and said, oh, I understand. Presten had been treated at OU Children's starting in 2023 and 2024 for a chronic form of leukemia that's common to autistic kids. And it was really rough. It was chemotherapy. It really took a toll on his health. They couldn't keep his weight up. He was very, very sick, and it wasn't working. So they decided to take another path, and they went a more holistic treatment route, and they went for genetic testing, which that's really the cutting edge of what's happening with CML, which was his diagnosis now, and autism, both of them, ironically. So they went a different route for about a year. OU Children's hadn't seen him in over a year. And the worker said, well, let's just meet with your current provider, who was the more holistic provider, and we'll just find out what your plan is, and that's all we need. Well, that was a ruse. She showed up with an emergency custody order and 2 police officers and took Presten immediately to OU Children's, where within 24 hours, he had blood transfusions that they did not want. And they would not honor the family's request that those be from blood that was without COVID vaccination. He also, within 24 hours, was on chemotherapy, and his health plummeted. He immediately on chemotherapy had organ issues. He was incredibly sick. And then they insisted on a bone marrow transplant that caused a massive infection in him and a huge hematoma on his hip. So in that article, which I linked to one first article.
When you even say it, as I saw the picture, you know how you get those crawlies under your skin when you, it's like, I couldn't even, I just couldn't imagine Dana seeing that and not wanting to just hurt people.
No, he was, his well-being from the day they knocked on his door to when I interviewed him, which was a matter of days, was so marked that it was disturbing.
Yeah.
So he came into custody on a Friday, and then on Monday, just on Monday, they had a show cause hearing. That's where DHS has to prove that the emergency custody order was needed. During that hearing, it was reported that Tanya Stevens, who was then the CPS worker, under the supervision of a supervisor named Nicole Warren, had withheld critical information about the treatment plan that they'd been following for the past year. They went straight back to OU, who hadn't seen him in over a year, and they got the emergency custody order. So there's this funny relationship that we'll talk more about between DHS and the University of Oklahoma. It's kind of interesting. So
interesting or angering, maddening.
Oh, you're gonna be shocked. So the judge, Daniel McClure, is Dana Mooney, the mother's attorney, and he proved in court that they did not meet the burden to say this child was medically neglected. And the judge, Judge Gass, put him back into Dana's custody. But immediately they threatened and said, between OU and DHS, if you remove your child from the hospital, even though he's now in your custody, which should mean under the Constitution that you get to make all decisions for him and with him, because he didn't want to be there either. They said, if you remove him, we're going to make an immediate report that OU will call the DHS hotline and say it was against medical advice. You could face criminal charges, and we will take him back into custody. So it went on for 11 days. There was an 11-day standoff. And then on October 17th, Dana Mooney decided to discharge her son. And she had some really good supporters in that. Senator Shane Jett was there on site. Roberta Lewis, who is the other Moms for Liberty mom who had her child medically kidnapped, and she's now running for a state house seat. She was there, and I'm working on a piece to talk a little bit more about that, because it was an incredibly interesting conversation in the middle of the night with the people at OU. And she ended up leaving. She ended up taking him home. She said, he's in my custody. She provided a letter stating she had a new provider, Dr. Robert Marsh, who's out of Tulsa, who would be treating the hematoma. And then also she had another provider who was a more holistic provider in the Oklahoma City area who would be treating the ongoing CML, the leukemia. And she couldn't see him yet because he wanted Presten off of chemotherapy at least 2 weeks. But everyone was informed of this. She was not leaving against medical advice. She was taking a different path. But that is not the way they saw it. So within hours of being home, and with her doctor from Tulsa saying, I need a sign on the door saying he's immunocompromised. No one is going in unless it's family or a medical provider. Just have them call your attorney. They were banging on her door within hours. They got home in the wee hours of the morning, and DHS was there as fast as you can say. I'm so sorry. Hello, Moto. Sorry. So they kept coming back. They were harassing the family. They were in touch with Daniel McClure, who's the family's attorney, and he was providing medical updates. Dana Mooney actually took Presten up to, during those days that he was back at home, she took him to Tulsa, and he met with that doctor, Dr. Marsh. They did labs. They found out that his white blood cell count was a big thing in the emergency custody order, had come down to a healthier level. Things were going well. He told them they're doing a good job. We're moving forward. So here she was with these two treatment providers. Then, out of nowhere, within 24 hours of seeing Presten, Dr. Marsh entered a letter into his OU records, stepping away from the case, saying he would no longer provide care. So Dr. Marsh went from things are going well, absolutely, fully informed about the case from the beginning. I have several sources on that. And then he stepped away from the case. He's not been willing to comment to me. He's not been willing to talk to me and to tell me why. We don't know what the pressure was to make him pull away from the case, but he did. So on October 22nd, DHS went back to the court. They requested another emergency custody order to take Presten into emergency custody. And they said he no longer has a provider and that Dr. Marsh had pulled out. So that's not a true statement. He did have another provider.
Just awful.
But they didn't tell the court. This was something in a recent interim study. Representative Gabe Woolley has some new legislation to up standards for DHS. And everyone who testified at that interim talked about lies by omission in DHS. And this was one of them. The other thing that was a basis for the emergency custody order is that they said that Dana Mooney and the child's father were not participating with them. They were, yes. And the truth is, they had been in direct contact with their attorney, Daniel McClure. Yeah. He was providing information, willing to answer any questions, had asked that those questions be forwarded to him, but it didn't happen. They just said they weren't cooperating. And so the court rubber stamped it and took him back into custody. This time, the threat, if she did not bring him herself to OU Children's Hospital, for admission was that she would be criminally charged. So they ended up back in the hospital. So I started to really look at this. Again, they had a show cause hearing coming up again, a second show cause hearing, and we'll talk about what happened at that second hearing shortly. But I started to look at it and say, why? Why, if you were DHS and you went to a show cause hearing and they reprimanded you for not telling the truth, the whole truth, and they put a child back into a parent's custody, why would you go back at it again? I mean, there has to be a motivation there on this case on someone's part. So I started looking into who the workers were and who the supervisor of those workers were. And there's one consistency. Nicole Warren is a woman who was the Child Protective Services supervisor on both of these technically two investigations. And as I sat outside the second show cause hearing, so this is Nicole Warren and her spouse, as I sat outside of the second show cause hearing, where they again had to come back and prove that another emergency order was justified, I listened as a representative from OU Medical came over and sat next to her, asked her if she was from DHS. She said yes. And the person from OU said, the woman said, "Are you the worker or are you the supervisor?" And she said, "Well, right now I'm both," with a smile. And I said, "There's something up here." There's something going on here. And as you look into her public, very public social media, where she also identifies herself as a supervisor in child welfare under tax dollars, she has some pretty progressive leanings. So right after the show cause hearing, the second show cause hearing, when she again was found to have omitted things from the court, she changed her Facebook name. So I don't know if that was because she knew people were now looking or if she knew something was coming. She left the courtroom very abruptly, went through the waiting area, had 4 DHS people around her. She was very upset, which I assumed sitting there meant that they had ruled in the mother's favor. That is not what happened at all. The judge, instead of saying, yes, you withheld this doctor's information, you did not tell the whole truth about this case, he still ruled with OU and went with the medical providers. So the judge was making a decision about what medical interventions were best for Presten, and no one was talking about how the parent actually has a right to make that decision, not DHS and not a judge. So it's interesting, but she changed her name on her Facebook page, which is her primary social media that I could identify. But you can see.
Can I mention something really fast? So when in my experience, and I think in yours too, when people see what you've written and they don't like it, especially if they're in government somewhere,
yes,
they will complain to you and say, well, you can't take pictures off of social media. You can't, take pictures. Well, you can, because anything that says that it's public, anything that's posted for the public to see,
correct,
is fair game.
Correct.
And I just think it's important to stress that, because if you feel so strongly about your life situation that you're willing to put it up on your social media so everybody else can see it, that's an important distinction.
It is an important distinction. And in Oklahoma, we have an ironclad, nearly ironclad, I've never seen it busted, anti-SLAPP law, which says if you're telling the truth, and this is publicly available information, social media is the media now. So if it was in the newspaper, I could reiterate it and I could source it from the newspaper, that there's nothing that you can do about that. So it's a huge protection for journalists who really want to tell the truth and who really want to dig in and say what's happening with our government behind the scenes, or with anything really. So that is one of the reasons that I'm glad to be working in Oklahoma. But if you look at her political leanings, she's got something here that says pride is important because someone tonight still believes they're better off dead than being gay. That is a line that is used over and over in adolescent mental health when they're talking to a parent who won't go along with a child transitioning into another gender, whether it's socially or medically. Would you rather have a dead son or a live daughter, or vice versa? So that's a really dangerous assumption that's out there, that working on fear. She's definitely an advocate of free and open abortion, and all personal beliefs aside, we are in Oklahoma where it's illegal, and you are working for the government under tax dollars. So this is difficult. I don't know what a supervisor, perhaps they should be talking about what they espouse politically, because if you're working at DHS, in your role, you should be politically neutral. It is not your job to bring politics. And then, you can just see that there are a lot of things here that are very progressive and left leaning. So we have this disproportionate number of people who are leaning socially, politically to this one side. And we have the vast majority of Oklahomans, arguably the most conservative state in the union. 77 out of 77 counties voted for Trump every time in 3 different presidential cycles. So we don't have agencies that are representative of the populace. And when you think about a representative republic, a constitutional republic, that's a really core piece about government, that it has to represent the masses. So when we're looking at Warren here, another thing that was really concerning is on her social media, where she obviously espouses lifestyle, politics, stances on everything. I see this a lot with DHS workers. They are recruiting people to work within that state agency on their social media. Well, who is connected to this woman on social media? Disproportionately, people that agree with her values and her politics. Therefore, when they do that, and when the agency allows that, people hire like-minded people. That is what happened. And then they promote like-minded people. And that's sort of how we've gotten here, where this agency could be weaponized against the majority of people in Oklahoma. So she is, and she's saying, come work here, you know me, we'll have laughs. So of course, those are going to be friends, family, and acquaintances who are like-minded. And then just some publicly available information. This is what I do with everybody. Warren, who was previously Brown, had back-to-back DUI charges. That's her criminal history in 24, and then again in 2004, and then again in 2005.
Recently.
2004, 2005, well, 20 years ago, wow. But that is, I always look at people's criminal, because you want to see, is DHS vetting? Is there anything here that's concerning? And then public records show that she was hired in child welfare in 2015, and she was promoted in 2022. So another trend you're going to see here is in 2015, the Supreme Court reversed their decision, the standing decision, and federally made same-sex marriage the law of the land. So that's not something, some states voted on it prior. There were states where same-sex couples could go get married before then. But for the rest of the states where the constituents did not vote for that, and it came upon them by the Supreme Court, that happened in 2015. And what we see in 2015 is a rush of LGBT people wanting to work in the child welfare system, because now, if we can legally be married, it would be discriminatory legally if we could not foster, adopt, that kind of thing. So you see a really big push with a lot of these people that I'm going to show you over the next weeks, that they came in around that time, 2015. We also saw an increase in the number of nonprofits who were popping up to help recruit or support LGBT foster and adoptive homes. So you started to see tables set up at the Pride events and the Pride parades that were these nonprofit groups that are specifically to increase the number of LGBT foster caregivers. So that's kind of been the trend. And then, someone else comes in, another administration, and now DEI is not legal. But that doesn't mean that our entire system isn't disproportionately filled with hires that may have been based on things other than ability and competence. So despite the deception at the hearing that was reportedly pointed out by Daniel McClure, Judge Gass agreed it was concerning. It is reported that Daniel McClure asked for portions of the records to be available. So these are juvenile deprived cases. I can't get open records related to those. No one else can, only the parties. DHS is not supposed to talk publicly about these cases. The attorneys, the district attorneys cannot talk publicly about specifics of juvenile deprived cases, but parents can say whatever they want to whoever they want. They can talk to journalists. They can talk to the media. It is their right because this is their information. So at that hearing, this is Judge Gass on the left, who before had put Presten back into his mother's custody. This time, despite the same thing happening with DHS, he, under the request of, on the right, Assistant District Attorney Eric Epland out there in Canadian County, he ruled in favor of the Assistant District Attorney. So viewers should know that Judge Gass, prior to being the juvenile deprived judge in Canadian County, was the Assistant District Attorney. So he's been in this circle for a long time. So he ruled with the guy who had his previous job, which is kind of a neat loop. One of the things that happened... A neat loop, yes.
Neat loop, okay.
Yes. One of the things that I really wanted to talk about is what the parents report was happening in the hearing with OU Health. So there were multiple testimonies from experts from OU. And there were people, too, that were treating Presten. One was a Dr. Ray McNall-Knapp, and one was a Dr. Keisha Begg. Throughout Presten's entire stay, forced first stay when he became so ill, they had referred to the drugs that they were giving him as chemotherapy. Every nurse said they were chemo. Every doctor said they were chemo. I was in the room interviewing Presten when 3 of these people, including Dr. McNall-Knapp, came in, and Dr. McNall-Knapp informed the mother that she would be starting the 3rd chemo for Presten on the next day. And I quote, chemo. So that's all that they called it. They got into court in the second show cause hearing and said they'd never given him chemo. So, go ahead.
I mean, I'm not a person that can lie by omission or just do it because I have this thing. It doesn't happen. So I'm trying to think of how you actually, I mean, even if I could lie, let's just say that, even if that was part of my makeup and I did it, wouldn't you kind of be going, well, somebody's going to catch me. Maybe I should be careful about this. I think honestly, Katy, that's part of the big issue for me is that these people seem to lie. I mean, without even, like it's breathing. I don't know. It bothers me so badly. I mean,
and it's lies within juvenile deprived court are ruining families. So it's not a small lie. It's a very serious and impactful thing that's happening. So you have to assume that OU Health has many lawyers. You have to assume that these doctors were prepped before they came in, and thus the language change from when they were talking to mom, Presten, about what drugs they were giving him. There are huge questions about informed consent. When you tell someone they're on chemo for 2 weeks and then you change and say, no, it's not chemo, it's a TKI. So it's this tyrosine kinase inhibitor. So apparently now oral chemo is not chemo if you're in court. I did a little research because I had personally heard this doctor who testified to this say in the hospital room, call it chemo. So I did some research, and the family did allow me to go into Presten's online records, where they specifically, in his list of pharmaceuticals, cite this drug, which is a 100 milligram chemo tablet that they're giving him. So they called it chemo, not just verbally, but they recorded it as chemo.
Well, Jen Annie, who's a nurse, says that she's familiar with it. Yes, it's a chemotherapy drug.
Thank you very much. And that's what the nurses were calling it. So there's also a page in Presten's online records with OU Health that is specifically chemotherapy affects education for Presten. And it is 17 total pages. This is just the first couple of buttons of what to expect. And I already told you what happened the first 24 hours when this kid was on this chemo. The side effects were absolutely brutal. So it just threw me back to the COVID vaccine and how the medical establishment, again, OU Health, that's a state-funded institution. They take our tax dollars. But how the CDC quietly redefined legally what a vaccine is, because the mRNA vaccines were not immunizations. Right. So they redefined what immunization was. And this is a lot like it. If I have to get it under an umbrella to protect the pharmaceutical companies and the hospitals, we'll get it under there. If we have to talk it out of that umbrella to show that we're not doing harm, that's what they're going to do. It's just disingenuous. It feels very disingenuous.
Well, let me mention, Jen also said, I hope you printed that record out.
Oh, yes, for sure.
Then I did want to go back to this one because I think it's, so when I was talking about lying, and I'm kind of a little distracted because I have a sheep giving birth outside the window. And so I'm like, oh, is everything going okay? And at least that's nice. I mean, there's a baby sheep being born and, we're having to listen to this. So at least that's, there's some good things in the world, I guess. The lying shows they have no fear of accountability, which says a lot about the agency's culture, and the culture is set by management. And which is, I don't get that you can't get that that's 100% factual. That's just any job. Mm-hmm. And so Earl's daughter just kind of follows that up by saying, you're a wealth of information, Katy. So is everyone in power friends with Jeffrey Cartmel, who's now who now runs the agency? Because I can't make sense of how destructive they are toward the true welfare of our children.
That's an interesting comment. So yeah, and you're right. I assume that he's talking about Jeffrey Cartmel. And what I find interesting about him as a pick, he's a recent appointee as the director over all of Oklahoma right. Department of Human Services. We're talking about the child welfare arm of it. But he definitely had the power from the beginning to end this. And when a judge said, put him back, you did not meet the burden to say that this child needed emergency custody order, you would think that there would be a call down from above to say, whoa. The publicity on this is not worth whatever you're trying to do to this family, knock it off. But it didn't happen.
But I wonder, because I've heard people say, well, he doesn't have the ability to do that, because you know how they do that, especially in state agencies, right? So they stick them in this spot and then they'll say, well, you don't have the power to do this. Or they'll lie and say, I don't have the power to do that, but they really do. But it's just easier, to say they don't so that they can get out of it. I think if you're the head of anything, the buck stops there, right? I mean, why are you the head of something if you can't fix the problem?
Well, the presumption there that is, if he doesn't have the power to stop this, no one does.
Right.
There's no accountability.
So I don't get how they can even argue. And I do want to put this up because, well, I mean, not just because she said she agrees with me. I mean, obviously that's important. How can they constantly lie?
Well, if there's no consequences, it's a lot easier. I mean, it's a lot easier to lie when there's no consequences. And that's something in Representative Gabe Woolley's has, I believe it's House Bill 1100 that is, still kicking around up there, that would actually provide for some criminal penalties for DHS employees who do this, because
Well,
this is a huge problem.
There's a little bit of a follow-up there. So state agencies use this, and I'm not going to say it right, but I know you know it. It's that excuse for you can't sue me over this because I'm a state. What do they call that?
They call that,
because they've used it in my lawsuit against the state election board. They'll say, well, we're the election board. You can't sue us because of law.
They are indemnified from any form of
Yeah, and
yes.
how
and
can that be?
There's state law. It's kind of like, how could we have possibly put a law in place that says you cannot sue a vaccine manufacturer for doing this to your child? It's the exact same thing, only we have it at the state level. So we've seen absolute wrongful death cases, which we'll talk about in a second, like the Xander Brentmeyer case. Yes, absolutely.
That's it. Qualified immunity.
Qualified immunity.
That's it. Thank you, Scott. That's exactly what they call it. So then how do you even but I guess my point is, if they're going to, and qualified immunity doesn't always work. Your friend, Will at Rutherford Institute, I don't think I've told you this, sent me a recent case, like just within the month, from Colorado that was essentially almost exactly the same as my case.
Wow. I told you he's brilliant.
And yeah, it was amazing. And he sent it to me when I sent it on to the attorney, and he was like, hey, that's great. But they asserted qualified immunity in that case because she was dealing with the water board. So not the election board, but kind of I mean, honestly, it was bizarre. It was like the same case, just different agency. And they asserted qualified immunity, and the court struck them down and said, you don't get that. You don't get to have qualified immunity if you're tramping on the First Amendment rights of somebody else.
Correct.
So they will do it, but honestly, Katie, number one, who has the money to sue these people?
Typically not the people that they harm.
Right.
Yeah. And that's what makes it incredibly sad and destructive and tough to report on. Agreed. Okay. So
sorry.
That's okay. No, those are all really good points. Another thing that I want to make sure I cover is their discrepancies between, there was this thing about OU and DHS were right in there together. Everything they said, they're like this. And so also with the prosecutor's office, with the DA's office, they're all in there like this. So you see this web just building over a family. Luckily, Mom has a fantastic attorney. That is almost never the case.
Right.
So OU Health, those experts gave conflicting testimony in this second show cause hearing that resulted in him going into permanent custody. DHS was describing him as near death.
Oh,
and
the pictures that you showed, Katie, when you went up there and you took pictures of him, it was terrifying.
It was terrifying. But let me tell you this, he left. There were 11 more days of this, and then he left, and he was out for a significant number of days, and his health rebounded. How he was feeling physically, his white blood cell count, he was off the antibiotics now, finished those for the bone marrow infection. The hematoma got better. They were treating the hematoma. He was feeling much, much better. He was much, much more mobile. And now DHS is saying in court, after they take him again, they put him into the hospital and they essentially did nothing for him. He sat there. He didn't have an IV. They weren't starting any of this because they knew there was a second show cause hearing going. There was no life-saving measures. There was no immediate treatment of anything. So that makes this really suspect.
Suspect.
But yes, DHS said he was near death. Dr. Begg, one of the OU physicians, said he was in imminent danger. And then Dr. McNall, the one I told you about who called it chemo in the room, said, no, he's not in imminent danger. So we have this moment of a contradiction It didn't matter. Judge Gass still said he knew what was best and put him into permanent custody, saying that he was going, it's reported that he said that he was leaning toward the expert advice of the OU physicians. Well, that expert advice wasn't even agreeing with itself, which was really interesting. So here, someone saying he's near death, someone saying he's at imminent danger, and within an hour of leaving the courtroom, Dana Mooney reports that she got a call saying that she needed to make a list of family members and placements for Presten because he's now in permanent custody and he would be discharged from the hospital probably within 48 hours. So I don't think that they believed he was near death. All of these contradictions really make you think that it is possible that the goal of the entire exercise was to separate Dana Mooney from Moms for Liberty from her child.
Stick it to the Mooney family.
That's certainly what it feels like. And then the case from there, now that he was in permanent custody, goes from Child Protective Services, that's who investigates it, any call of abuse or neglect, any allegation. And then once a child goes into permanent custody, you go past the show cause hearing, they're in what's called permanency. They move to a different unit. So great, fresh start, new supervisor, new worker. Well, it turns out that the supervisor is a man named Pierce Nix. There's not much known about his professional history, except that there's a LinkedIn page that I linked to that shows that in 2019, he was a substitute teacher at Putnam City Schools. Prior to joining, we don't really know how long that lasted, but he came to DHS in 2019. So he's already a supervisor in 2025, even though he's been there 5 or 6 years, right? So he is also same-sex married. Nicole Warren, the CPS supervisor, had been same-sex married twice since it became legal. This man is same-sex married. And if you look at their public-facing, again, social media pages, his profile picture is the No Kings logo. So it's his right to believe whatever he believes. Right. The point is very out of keeping with the majority of Oklahomans. And he's in a service agency where all of his clients are the majority of Oklahomans.
Well, and I'm going to say this too. I'm going to double down on what you're saying. Lots of us have political beliefs. Well, not me necessarily, but there are people who have political beliefs that don't splash them all over their page, or they'll just do it for friends. They're not going to make it a public facing post, right? So correct. You have to stop and think about the mindset of the people that are doing this, right? Because they can have whatever you want to do, right?
Right.
But the point of the matter is they want to do it so much that they're going to splash it out there on a public page so that everybody sees it, which means that they're a lot more out there about it than somebody's like, yeah, I went to the No Kings rally, I put it as a post on my friends, but you can't see it publicly. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
That's a big thing, but there's a distinction there that's important. So these people are activists. They're not necessarily generic citizens. Does that make sense? Because it's like John Boy says, it's pushing their agenda in their own way.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly if these people are going to put it on their social media and it's going to be out there for the public to say, I would argue they're activists.
I would too. And you have to at least question in work that's so important as in separating people from their children. Is someone who espouses publicly these beliefs capable of operating with a family with completely different beliefs without bias? And that's the thing when they train child welfare workers. I've been there. You have to leave your bias on the front porch. You cannot bring your bias into it. They used to bang that home constantly. I don't know if they're still banging that home.
Well, they literally either can't be, Katy, or these people are such activists that they're just given the whole DHS system the double middle finger symbol, because there's just no way. I mean, read because I don't, if people didn't read your article, they need to know the rest of the story, as.
Right. So this permanency supervisor for DHS that is now in charge of the Mooney case publicly talks about, they are connected to and involved with what's called the bear culture. So that's part of, if you're not familiar with some of the LGBT communities, there's pup culture, which is also another gay male subsect of the LGBT community. And bear culture is essentially men who they don't identify physically with the more stereotypical definition of a gay man, the more sort of effeminate kind of thing. Often the relationships, they have beards, they're sort of bigger, hairy guys. It is also in a lot of circles, if you do some research into it, which I did, they call them bears and they call them cubs. And it's a way to introduce younger males into the gay lifestyle, them being the cubs and the others being the bears. And this gentleman has it across his knuckles. It's tattooed across his knuckles, bears. And he's very open about it on his Instagram profile. He says, he's about bears and cubs, Oklahoma moonshine, tattoos, bears, dogs, bears, and cubs. And when you look at, again, this is very publicly facing. Anyone could have gone and looked at this if they wanted to know about this person, which is kind of the point of social media. You want people to know about you. He says, people who don't take the time to get to know me think I'm an asshole. Sorry for the cuss, but I'm quoting. And I'm okay with that. So we're talking about a service agency, and permanency is where you do the long, tough work. You come beside a family in their darkest time. You learn about them. You have to build a trusting relationship with them to be able to lead them towards services that might be really helpful. You have to work hand in glove with a family if you're going to get a kid home. And someone who says, you don't take the time to get to know me, you're going to think I'm that.
I was going to say, can an asshole really do that?
I don't know. It's just an interesting self-definition statement for someone who's in permanency. Permanency are sort of the loving fairy godmothers of child welfare. That's what they even say to you. If you don't have that personality, maybe you should be over here. Because you're working, you have to have a driving need to help families stay together. So,
well, they have a driving need. All right. Scott makes the point, and this is, again, an important part of the point that you've made, Katy. Mm-hmm. In the military, another form of government employee, we're not allowed to make certain statements, march in certain parades, wear your uniform to say things. You're not allowed to do that when you're in uniform. So please explain to me how this works, and don't tell me that you're not an activist or you're not like way out there if you've got bear tattooed, and explain what a cub is.
So a cub, in my research, is the younger, and a lot of times that's how very young males are indoctrinated into this bear culture. Oh, and it also is defined in some of those sources as sexually the under, not the over, which is kind of a disturbing thought. But so there's a lot of lingo that goes with this. And you do have to do the research to understand what they are saying. I remember I did an article directly tied to Western Heights, was a lot of people who were sort of associated with the pup culture. And it's very much the same. There's kind of if you look at the secondary people who are linked to this couple, who he works for DHS, there's some things out on Facebook that I didn't know that you were allowed to put on Facebook. And I would never, those are secondary people that aren't directly involved in this. So it's not appropriate to pull them forward. But these are the people that comment on their posts, that put bears over it. There are instances of the bear culture and the grooming of kids. I'm not accusing this person of that at all.
No, but it happens. I mean, why would you say you're interested in a cub? I mean, honestly, I can't even.
Well, one of the things was, but that was such a good point from Scott. I kept thinking through researching this, why are they letting them say these incredibly political things on the same webpage where they're identifying themselves as an OK DHS employee.
Yeah.
It's just all those boundaries are out the door. That used to be, you would be called in and told to change that. One thing that really gave me pause for concern, because I'm looking here at the motivations. Could there be motivations for them to be targeting the Mooney family based on her political work? And so for birthdays in the progressive community, it's a big thing where you're doing a fundraiser for some nonprofit. That's like it's a kind of a virtue signaling habit that they have. So for this particular supervisor, for his birthday, and this is back 2019, so he did a fundraiser for Free Moms Hugs. And that's an organization that started out of Oklahoma City. And essentially what it proposes is, if your family doesn't accept everything about your lifestyle, let us come be your family. And he even put in this that the Free Moms Hugs, he was raising money because it's close to his heart. It's a group of affirming parents and allies who love LGBTQ plus community unconditionally, and that are dedicated to educating families, church, and civic leaders, encouraging them to not only affirm the LGBTQ plus community, but to celebrate them. So if it's different folks out there, like maybe the Mooneys, they need to be re-educated to celebrate the LGBTQ community. Well, that's very intolerant of a lot of religious views in the state of Oklahoma. And I'm not just talking about Christian religious views. There's a lot of religious views that are never going to get behind same-sex relationships. That's not within their faith doctrine. And this is just incredibly intolerant of anyone who wouldn't feel that way. So you start to see where things really, if you believe that, then you really could turn an incredible amount of power that's been put on your desk against a family who is never going to feel that way. Their deeply held beliefs do not allow them to feel that way. Now, are they going to trample on LGBT people? No. As I said, often those are the people that would stand up for their free speech rights or would help them protect their children at school from a situation. But there just seems to be such an intolerance, such this bias that's happening against what, frankly, most people in Oklahoma believe.
More traditional values, yes.
Correct. And then another thing, sort of the same thing where Nicole Warren, back to the CPS supervisor, she also did, one of her birthdays was a fundraiser, and you can see that on the left here. And it was for PFLAG of Oklahoma City. So PFLAG is a national LGBT advocacy group. They have a lot to do with bringing groups into schools, fighting to keep that literature in schools that parents were fighting against. And if you look at PFLAG Oklahoma City, they work directly in recruiting LGBT foster and adoption. So here's a DHS worker who's leading you to this organization on a page where she identifies herself as working under these taxpayer funds to an organization, and they're highlighting another OK DHS worker, adoptions and foster care recruitment specialist, Comfort Kydell. So now we have DHS recruitment specialist, that's a high position, working directly, this web across the state of these nonprofits and DHS workers playing more than one role and recruiting LGBT foster care people into the system. So you start to ask questions about how are they prioritizing placements? And in these placements, when concerning things come up, if they do, are they being investigated with fidelity? Are they keeping kids safe? Are they following all the same rules that they would for other families? And what we do know about Comfort Kydell, so she was that Oklahoma DHS recruitment specialist who was also working with PFLAG. She actually had her own nonprofit, and we reported on this when we were talking a lot about Bartlesville. She had her own nonprofit called the Village Fosters while she worked with DHS, and they recruited and supported LGBT foster parents. They collaborated with a group called Oklahomans for Equality, with a local board member named Jessica Pitts. And Jessica Pitts also worked for DHS at the time. So you see this whole web of they're trying to bring in as many LGBT foster families as possible. And there's also CPS workers involved. They're also on boards of these really progressive nonprofits. And that is where the case came from they recruited a lesbian family. They placed children in that lesbian family's home that were involved with these women, these nonprofits up in Bartlesville, Washington County, OKDHS. A small child's arm was broken. Jessica Pitts, who was the CPS worker, who was on the board of Oklahomans for Equality Bartlesville, went in and investigated and said, nope, didn't happen, unsubstantiated. They went ahead and placed a newborn baby into the home, and 2-month-old Xander Bruntmeyer was abusively murdered by the same woman who was accused on the arm. So police went back afterward, and she was convicted on both, and she's spending a lifetime in prison. But the point here being, why were the safety standards and the investigation standards that are mandated under law laxed in that household? And a child.
Well, and it doesn't matter. Okay, so she's in prison. Okay, good. But you just lost the life of a baby. Exactly. That should never have happened because of those safety standards you just said. You know, and I want to point out a couple of things here. Scott said, and it's true, you can't just tolerate this. You have to celebrate it, right?
Exactly.
I mean, it's not even they'll bully you if you're not tolerant, but it has to go beyond that. You know, if you're not out swinging with the drag queens, you know, then you're a bigot. And then Earl's daughter said, our tolerant progressive society has emboldened the sickest among us. My sister is gay and she'd never be this disgusting.
Oh, correct.
And think about it. There are gays against groomers. There's a whole group of people, you know, so that this isn't even normal for the abnormal, if that makes sense.
It's not. It's so it appears that we have at this point, through promoting the like-minded, we've got a culture of persecution. We've got a culture of protectionism. These are all things that have no place in child welfare, where kids' lives are at stake. It's a culture of unaccountability. Like we talked about at the beginning, there's no feedback loop. There's no grievance line for families who are caught up in this and are dealing with someone who's basically biased against their values. It's an anti-meritocracy. As I said, their standard for success. Are you getting kids home? No one is promoted based on that. And we seem to be stuck that a lot of people think DEI is gone, but we're going to suffer the consequences. You can't just fire people out of the system. And we don't seem to have anybody at the top of the system who's willing to handle things like this. I do want to share with anyone who's interested.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for doing that. Yeah.
That there is a give, send, go for the Mooney family, because this is not going to end anytime soon. And so the legal bills are going to be mounting up. They have what's called an adjudication hearing in December. And that's where they must go before the court and they can present their side of the story. And DHS can present theirs, and they need to make the case. Yeah. DHS needs to make the case that the child needs to be legally adjudicated deprived and as a state custody child. So that's a really big battle for them. They're trying to build an even bigger legal team to make that happen. And people have been generous so far, but they think it's going to cost them about $20,000 to have the appropriate representation. So anyone who would like to do that, that would be appreciated. The only other point that is bothering me that we haven't really covered, because I didn't really write about it yet, is about the financial incentives and this relationship between DHS and OU Health. And it may not just be OU Health, but they are a state-funded hospital. The minute Presten came into custody, he was put on Sooner Care.
Right.
And so it's a blank check. A very sick child is a very profitable thing for OU. And in my further research, I'll have more out about this later. I've found some higher management within DHS, higher than what we've covered in this case, that are actually being paid by DHS and at the same time by the University of Oklahoma. And some of it is for being adjunct professors, some of it is for undescribed things. So there's a really strange relationship going on here where DHS workers bringing OU these kids to be treated against their family's will seems to be profitable for both. I actually found a public record where one pretty high up person in DHS was paid $3,500 by OU, and some of it's OU Health, some of it's the OU campus, for 18 hours worth of work. 18 hours, $3,500. So there's something going on here that just doesn't smell right. When they go into court and pigpile on a family, and you find out that they're lining each other's pockets, one through medical bills and through student care, and one through payments to DHS workers through OU, something's not right.
Well, it's like Julia says. We have a culture of predatory behavior because of unlimited taxes, which are then used to murder and everything in between.
Correct.
If we would get rid of the money part of it, if we would say, you know what, your budget is not this, or, we would stop because you've explained the court cycle before with children and how that it ends up being a cycle because this happens and then that happens and then this person it's horrendous, and it just simply needs to stop. But the only way to do it is to starve that beast.
Correct. So in a way, not that I agree with their comments, but what I said about what legislators tell me that they are told at the Capitol about don't even try to reform DHS, it's too much of a mess. I don't agree with that statement, but now I understand it. It truly is. They stopped being helpful a long time ago. And I do know that there are really good workers out there. So it's just like when we talk about educators. For those of you child welfare workers who are getting kids back to their families and are working with Fidelity, and this is your life's work, this can't be a good culture for you to work in, but thank you for doing it. Thank you for continuing to do it.
Well, and our buddy Michael makes a point. Do you really think a judge or lawyer that graduated from OU is going to be completely impartial when it comes to OU medical?
Well, it is. I mean, that really could be loyalties. Where do your loyalties lie? It was really surprising that this judge reversed the decision he had made on the first show cause hearing and didn't put this child back in his mother's custody, especially because omissions that were revealed in court and testimony that didn't agree from the OU experts. You would think on that ground alone, logically, that child would be home. So now Presten, to give you that, is in foster care, placed with a relative. This is not a family that doesn't function well. This is a family that could come up with lists of relatives. They have a great support structure with extended family. I've talked to several of them. They work very well together. This is an interesting situation. We'll see what happens in December with the adjudication, but there's going to be much more to come on this.
Well, Katy, we all appreciate you doing this because, and I know for God's sakes, Dana does. I absolutely know that for a fact. And it just, but the bottom line is this: you can write about it, we can talk about it, we can put it up here, we can have a big audience like we have today, really super nice audience. But the problem is, accountability has to start somewhere, and you have to make somebody accountable. And right now, the governor isn't willing to do that.
No.
The head of DHS isn't willing to do that. So if you have the two biggest people in the state who could be putting a big kibosh on this, and they're not doing it. Isn't that just an exclamation point on the kind of leadership that we have in this state? It's just lawless. It doesn't matter. I mean, hey, you get the tax dollars for it. You just get whatever you need to get done. I mean, really.
Well, I am working on an article right now because another revelation from this case, there've been so many and they're just ongoing, was the difference. Again, being a very conservative state, you would think that the Republican Party would be the one to step up and protect a parent's rights in this. And again, I'm not even a Republican. But the difference between how two senators responded to this was so striking to me that I think it's a picture of what voters need to understand and know for the November 2026 election.
You mean when Rosino came, Representative Rosino, and who was the other one, came out and on television and said, that we're the problem because we were blowing all of this out of proportion. So it was our problem.
Yes. So I'm collecting comments and I'm doing a little research on some things and putting together an article, just a juxtaposition between Senator Paul Rosino, who ironically is Dana Mooney's senator. This family is within his constituency, and he was not willing to help, and in fact went to the media and immediately called for censorship of anyone telling the truth about this case. And then you had someone like Shane Jett, who, and I'll be reporting on it, not only in front of the cameras, but behind the scenes, advocated for this family's rights in a way that I've never seen before. And there are some recorded conversations that are just going to blow people's minds, the difference. So that's where we are. The November 2026 election is about who's authentic and who's not. Who's uniparty and who's actually in line with the values of Oklahomans. And I think that's our job in the next year, is to bring that to the surface.
So Michael said, have any state reps reached out to Dana or you on this?
Yes. There's a handful, and I'll be honest with you, it's basically the Freedom Caucus.
Yeah.
It is the Freedom Caucus, and a number have reached out. There have been legislators outside of the hearings because they're not allowed in. So outside the building during the rallies supporting the Mooney family. But yes, we do. And some of the newer representatives are doing an amazing job. So that's really encouraging. And the Freedom Caucus is growing.
Isn't it true Rosino married a DHS caseworker?
No, Rosino, his second marriage, married, and again, he's the chair of the HHS, Health and Human Services Committee, so he would be the most powerful person with oversight over DHS, Department of Health, Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse. His now wife worked within the legislature as sort of an aide secretary, and when he became chair of HHS, she got a job at the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse. An agency that he is the most powerful person in oversight concerning. So yes, questions abound. Let's leave it at that.
Well, Katy, I do appreciate it. Everybody appreciates you. I mean, we all, none of this would have come out without you. And you just being such a bulldog and staying, beautiful as you are, beautiful bulldog, but, a bulldog and staying on it like this means it's huge. I mean, it's just a huge thing because I do believe that we're going to, at some point, get to the point where people are so angry about this because this case went everywhere. Oh my gosh, it went national. It went people I hadn't talked to it in a year. We're like, oh my gosh, Jenny, I saw your thing about that. It's terrible. I mean, people are up in arms about it. And the only way to fix it is to get people up in arms about it. You guys have to stay up in arms about it. And during the election, wipe these people out of these offices.
Well, the case continues to build that there's a massive cultural problem at DHS I mean, between this case and the Lincoln Lockman case, we have a problem. People were put into place, whether it's foster care providers or DHS workers, and that are protecting one another based on sexuality, which is bizarre that we're talking about that in a child welfare agency.
Absolutely.
And they have not been held to the safety standards by law. It's incredibly dangerous. This isn't personal. This is about child safety. It should be the most important thing happening in our state. And you can hear the uproar. It's a national issue. Medical kidnapping is a national issue. I'll be on a week from today with Dr. Ben Tapper, and he's been just a warrior about medical freedom. Nationally, people are mad about this case.
Well, again, thank you so much.
Thank you for the platform to let people know what's going on. We'll stay on it. And thank you to your whole audience
for doing the research. I mean, it's just, I mean, some days I thank you. Other days I'm like, I don't want to hear this. This is just horrifying. And some of the stuff in this article is just, I mean, I'm sorry. I don't, it's just awful. Scott says, God bless Presten and his family and everyone exposing this and trying to do the right thing. And Gracie says they want our kids and they'll come after them any way they can. But only if we don't stop them. So thank you again, Katy. You're a blessing and we really appreciate you. And I know so many of us are still continuing to pray for Dana and Presten.
Excellent. Go to our Give, Send, Go and bookmark V1SUT.com. We'll have more updates. There's so much more. We're going higher and higher in this culture of this agency.
All right. Thanks for being with us, everybody. Everybody have a beautiful weekend. It's going to be lovely until Sunday. So get out there today and tomorrow. And we'll talk to everybody again on Monday. We have Common Ground with Christy on Monday, and then we'll have our regular programs for Wednesday and Friday. So
super.
Make sure to look at the schedule on all of our social media outlets, and we will see you again next week. Have a great weekend. And thanks again, Katy.
Thank you.